So today we are going to study his strategic games. And generally with its style, if you observe his game, is very strategic and positional in nature. And Vidit is also my very good friend. We have been playing chess in childhood. He's younger to me, like 3 years, but we always competed in almost the same tournaments. But then at one point, his career just took off like a rocket.
Right.
Like he kept on increasing consistently his game, his rating, his knowledge in chess. And when I was 25, I think we were 2500 rating at the same time. But then I was stuck at some point, but he kept on increasing, and he was an inspiration for me since childhood.
Okay.
So I really looked upon him, and I tried to whenever I feel demotivated, I always looked upon him and took his example and inspiration. Board. Black plays bishop into c4, white plays b3. So Vidit has sacrificed a pawn, and after bishop to a6, can you guys tell me what is the point behind sacrificing the pawn? What is white's best move in this position? From here on, we'll see the masterpiece of Vidit Gujrathi. Strategic move here for white. So he sacrificed the pawn, not in order, or not to recover it immediately, because there's no way to do that. Knight d5 looks a very, very attractive move. I completely agree with it. But I think once the queen moves to e6, you have to then get busy defending the pawn on e2. Plus, the knight can launch on d4 and attack this pawn further. So black will create its own threats. So that's why instead of playing knight d5, it's important to eliminate the knight on c6 first. Now this might look like a counterintuitive move, because this bishop is a very strong piece for white, pressurizing on that diagonal. But this exchange, even though we are exchanging our good bishop for the knight on c6, damages black's pawn structure on the queen side permanently, right? So we are playing for a long-term advantage. Whenever there's a weakness in pawn structure, basically we are playing for a long-term advantage. We'll try to exploit that weakness of pawn structure, because it's not easy to rectify the pawn structure once it is damaged. And we'll see black did not get a chance to rectify it even till the very, very end. And bishop into c6, p into c6. Now white's next strategy should be to slowly pressurize this weak pawns, especially this pawn on c6, along the c file. And also we can see that once the pawn goes to c6, both, the a7 pawn is also slightly weak, slightly isolated. So now the strategy is clearly to break the rook on c1 and hit the pawn on c6. But for that, we need to move the queen away, and the queen can move to e3, c2, and b2. Which is the square that you will choose for the queen? Which is a good square for the queen comparatively? Yes, in this position. So it is queen e3, right? The point is queen e3 is a much more active square, hitting the pawn on a7, also taking care of the e5 pawn, tying down black's queen to the e7 square. And the other thing is this queen on e3 can also help us take control of the c5 square, where maybe in the future our knight can land, right? So queen e3 is a much better square compared to c2 or b2. And this doesn't require calculation. So first black defends the pawn on a7, more or less essential, and white plays rook a1. So we are also bringing our pieces with a tempo, so not giving black much chance to organize his defense. Black plays rook f e8, white plays rook c2. Clearly the idea is to double on the c file and win this pawn at some point, when after that, we can also try to hit the pawn on c7. But black is not going to give it up so easily. Black will try his best to create counterplay. So black plays bishop to c8. Now black is trying to create some threats, trying to exploit the weaknesses on white's queen side, or on white's king side, because our bishop on g2 has gone away. So bishop c8, white first plays knight to e4, hitting this pawn on c6. Now if black defends it passively with a move like bishop d7, then we can play rook d c1. And after something like f6, we can play knight c5, threatening to take on d7 and then take the c6 pawn. And after bishop f5, attacking our rook, we can play rook c4. So we can see that we are clearly dominating the queen side with this beautiful knight sitting on this strong outpost on c5, as well as this active rook, which is not only pressurizing the c file, but also active along the fourth rank. So white is clearly better in this position. So instead of defending passively, black decides to look for counterplay. So black plays bishop f5 straight away. giving away the c6 pawn, giving back the c6 pawn. So bishop f5, white takes the pawn. Black plays rook a d8, challenging white on the d file. Now, should we exchange rooks in this position, or should we just move the rook to c1? What do you think? What's the decision that you will take here? Now, almost everyone has answered. So the correct move in this position is to not exchange the rooks, but to simply move it to c1, hitting more on the c7 pawn. So black plays queen to b4. As I said earlier, black strategy is very clear. He's not there to defend it passively, but try to create counterplay. And we can see he's already creating some counter threats against our knight on c3. Now, a good move for white could have been knight c3. Maybe this is a much stronger move than what Vidit played in the game, because after knight c3, the c7 pawn, a7 pawns are hanging, and it's not easy for black to defend both of them. So this was a possibility, but instead Vidit played rook c4, keeping everything solid. Queen b6. And now there's another quick question for you. Whether you will choose to exchange the queens here or play knight c5. What will you choose? Again, it's all about comparison. Let's see whether you play the correct logical move. Right answer. Very good. So whenever you want to exchange a piece, again, you can just compare who is it actually going to benefit. Many times what happens is when we play online chess in bullet or blitz, in order to release the tension in the position, we just keep on exchanging pieces left, right, and center. And many of those exchanges may turn out to be bad. And even in this case, exchanging on b6 is bad because it rectifies black's weakness on the c7, the c7 pawn, right? So black will take back with the c pawn, and then we don't have any weakness to hit on. So that's why we should avoid the queen exchange, and that's what Vidit also did. He maintained the pressure as it is, plays the knight to c5. Black plays rook d5, activating the rook. White plays queen c3. So we can see a triple pressure along the c file. Slowly, Vidit is organizing his pieces in the best possible manner to exert a lot of pressure. And at the right time, he would like to win the pawn on c7. So queen c3, queen d6, e4. Black is of course not going to lose a piece here. Black has seen rook d1 check, king g2, and bishop g4. So black is trying to come closer to our king and create some counterplay. Now, h3 was a possibility for white, but he was afraid of bishop e2, which again gives white some counterplay. Sorry, black some counterplay. So in the game, he simply takes the rook, queen d1, and now the question is: should white play queen d3 or not? Do you think queen d3 is a good move? Okay, so in this position, uh, a, a few moves back, we rejected the exchange, but that was a completely different situation. We did not want to exchange on b6 because after c into b6, the weakness on c7 will go away. But in this case, if you observe closely, black is the one who's threatening deadly threats with bishop e2, queen f1, and it's going to be really tough for us to defend against it. Bishop e2 also attacks the rook, so it's not going to be easy for us to attack this pawn like, knight a6 or something like that, because bishop e2 is a deadly threat. So it's very important to exchange the queens now. If we exchange queens, then first of all, we take care that there's no dangerous counterplay against our king. And then we can slowly keep pressurizing black on the queen side. And in general, if you observe good positional games, you will realize that once one side gets a nice positional advantage, generally it always carries down to the end game. And in the end game, they'll slowly squeeze and win the game. And that's what Vidit is doing here. By eliminating queen, they eliminate any counterplay and then try to transpose and win the end game. So queen d3. Now, queen into d3, knight into d3, and bishop e2 was a good practical try for black, but after takes, going into this rook endgame, engine says it is slightly better for white, but practically it is not easy for black to defend at all because there are so many weaknesses. Both these pawns are isolated, and the rook can always keep hitting both these pawns. The king is also ready to join. So it is going to be tough for black practically, but that was the best try for black. So instead of queen d3, black plays rook d8. Again, trying to activate the rook. He is desperate to create counterplay. Queen into d1. Now, rook into d1 was a possibility. He decides to take it back with the bishop. And here, if you want to exploit black's weak pawns, what is the right strategy, the right move for white? Consider different options and come up with the best move for white in this position. For example, if you play knight b7, I think they can simply defend with rook d7. So attacking the c7 pawn doesn't help us. I think that's right, Zid, that is right. And if you try to go knight a6, I believe the main problem is bishop e2. When they may have the option of exchanging the the knight here, or even you play something like this, or something like this, they can also create counterplay with rook d2. So that's why it's not moving the knight at all. In fact, we should focus on hitting the other weakness in black's position, which is the a7 pawn, because this knight is doing a fantastic job at this moment, covering many key squares. So that's why the correct answer is rook a4. That's what Vidit played in the game, and it's becoming increasingly hard for black to defend the weak pawns because there are very few pieces remaining on the board. So after this, black plays g5. Can you guys tell me what's black's idea? Why is it playing a move like g5 instead of defending the pawn on a7? What's wrong with him? What's his idea? Does he have some idea or just playing for fun? Very good. So the threat here is to play g4 and bishop f3 and rook d1, and the king is about to get checkmated. We are busy winning pawns and suddenly our king is gone. So we have to be careful to opponent's threats, right? g5. Many times we may get excited, but we should always keep a check on our emotions. So after g5, Vidit is of course alert to it. He plays h3 first, h5, and now once again g4 is a deadly threat. What should we do about it? What's the correct way to defend on the king side? And in this position, the correct solution is g4. We completely stop black from achieving this setup with g4 and bishop f3. Now, there are some problems with the other defensive ideas. For example, f3, there could be rook d to check, and if the king moves bishop f3, when the king side, entire king side just falls apart. And if king f1, there could be bishop f3, which is even more dangerous with the rook entering on the first rank. Maybe it's just a checkmate after that. So that's why g4 is essential, preventing black from playing g4. And here the correct move for black was to take. And if they take here, of course, there's rook a7. And this was playable, although after rook d to a4, the pawn on c7 is still hanging and this pawn is about to run away. And there's no attack, no checkmating setup anymore possible for black on the king side. So this was a possibility, but instead they decided to keep pawns with h4. White took the pawn. Since now we are safe on the king side, there's no mating threat. Black plays bishop e2. White took the pawn here as well, and black plays rook to d1. What is the right move here for white? Now it's all about technique in the endgame. We are 2 pawns up. Black is still creating some threats, but what is the best way to release the pressure as well as march towards winning this game? Consider different ideas again and come up with the best move. Once again, if you look for opponent's threat, I think one of the threat is to play bishop f1 check. And if the king goes here, they simply take here and maybe try to exploit this passed pawn. And after bishop here, this, if this, then it feels like our king is safe. But then maybe they can play the rook d2 attacking this pawn. And if king g1, rook d1 back, looking for a discovered check. Or after bishop here, this here, they can also try bishop e2 with the threat of bishop f3 and checkmate. So white will again have to be forced to play something like this, and then they retreat with bishop f1. So these are some of the threats. So the correct move here for white is to play knight d7. Now this is where calculation comes in, because even though we are playing a strategic game of chess, we still need to be good in calculations to figure out some subtleties in the final positions. So knight d7, they are simply going to, white is simply going to win the pawn on e5, and the knight also acts as a defender by covering the key square on f3. So black plays bishop f1 check, king h2, and now we can see that if bishop e2, which is one of black's ideas, white can simply grab this pawn when the pawn on f7 is under attack next, and the f3 square is also covered. So there's not going to be any counterplay. So black tries the other way to create counterplay with rook d2. White simply grabs the pawn because he's not afraid of losing this pawn. There's king g1, which attacks both of them. Black plays king f6. By the way, just a quick quiz. So after takes rook f4, what is the best way to force opponent to resign? there are two moves being suggested here, but I think both of them are correct. So knight f7 is also possible, and the other one is rook f7. So after rook f7, rook f7, knight f7, then if black takes here, we collect this pawn, and we'll still have three pawns. And knight f7 is also possible, looking for a discovered check. Maybe knight f7 is slightly more accurate because we still keep on creating threats after that. So that's right. So this is the reason why black plays king f6, white takes the pawn with the knight, rook into a2, e5 check, king here. He just repeated once and then played knight d6. Now, once again, okay, I think you guys should tell me the threat of white. What is white actually threatening with knight d6? Be quick. Again, a lot of threats. I'm not denying that. But what is the main threat? Yes, Abbas, correct. Okay, to be honest, two threats, but let us see if I play this. Okay, then what do? I prevent e6. Yes. I think still not extremely easy. Knight f5 is made with maybe this, and the game still goes on. It's not going to be easy. The other good move in this position could be rook to c1 all the way back, because the bishop on f1 is trapped after that, right? Knight e8 is also met with rook into e5 check, and the king comes here. So it's not a immediate mate after that. So I think rook c1 is the right continuation here. All right. Anyways, in the game, yeah, that's what happened. In fact, black plays rook e2 and white plays rook c1, and black was forced to resign. So this was a beautiful game by Vidit, where he first sacrificed a pawn, damaged black's pawn structure by exchanging on c6 with the bishop, and then slowly kept on pressurizing, also taking care of opponent's counterplay on the king side. And he then managed to win with some simple and good combinations, good calculations towards the end in the end game.